Hey guys, thanks for clicking on the link to this video. So, it's been a while since we've talked Sox, and if you guys like hearing things about the Red Sox and you want to put something on in the background and just hear somebody talk Red Sox while you do cleaning, you're like in the right place right now. Because I'm about to word vomit a lot of stuff about the Red Sox when it comes to their current roster, the things that they're working on here at the winter meetings, current deals that they've signed, and just a bunch of other things in general. So, if you guys like that stuff, buckle up because here we go. All right, so first thing that I want to talk about right now is currently what the 26-man opening day roster is going to look like for the 2025 Red Sox. This is as of December 10th, 2025. So we're right at the beginning of the winter meetings here, and the Red Sox have already made some minor moves and a moderate move, you could say, out of the bullpen so far. So let's break those down really quick, that way you understand where the roster currently is at. Now, the Red Sox have reportedly signed or going to sign Aroldis Chapman out of the bullpen to be one of those guys that comes in out of the 7th or 8th inning and potentially even compete with the closer role with Liam Hendriks. Now, it has not been determined whether Liam Hendriks is the de facto closer heading into the next season, and he hasn't really pitched in the past 2 seasons, so it stands to reason that there's going to be some competition between him and Chapman for the closer role, at least as of right now, and potentially even some of these other guys. Now, Chapman has signed a 1-year deal, and there's kind of a lot of mixed things that come with that. But at the end of the day, what you're getting is a guy that's going to come in, and he's probably going to be very serviceable out of those later innings, and he is going to strike out a ton of batters, but he's also going to walk a lot of batters too. That's been his thing throughout his entire career. He is an elite strikeout guy, though. So let's take a look at this. 14.3 strikeouts per nine, which is one of the best in baseball. It's every year one of the best in baseball. Just the year before, 15.5 for the Texas Rangers, and then 16.3 in 29 innings with the Kansas City Royals. These are insane type numbers, and he's still at the top of his game when it comes to velocity. Now, the biggest issue with him, obviously, is just the walks aspect of it, and he's giving up a little bit more contact than he has previously. But as of right now, 14.3 strikeouts per nine, 5.7 walks per nine. These numbers are fairly comparable to some of his all-star seasons that he had back with the Yankees here in 2018, 19, and 2021. So there is still a guy that has potential to come in and be absolutely dominant out of the bullpen. Now, there's also the other side of Aroldis Chapman that kind of comes with it, and we're just talking the other side when it comes to what he does on the field. What he is off the field, something totally different that we're not going to get into right now. And I really know that a lot of people don't like the signing of Chapman here, but that's a whole nother thing that we're not going to get into because there's some gross, disgusting things, and I just don't want to really talk about it right now. But on the field, when you look at his splits, so let's look at the 2024 season here. Let's look at just month by month splits here, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. And he came in and he had a couple of months here to start and end the season that were not great. 6.0 ERA, 5.4 ERA, but then he has a bunch of months in here that are actually pretty solid. But you're always going to have those games with the Aroldis Chapman here where he kind of just absolutely blows up. He'll give up a ton of walks, just come in and just totally ruin your day as a fan. Like right here, 0.1 innings pitched, gave up 3 walks. Not great. That's not what you want to see. How many games right here are we looking at where he gives up multiple walks? There's 3 walks here without getting a single out, 2 walks here, 3 walks here where he blows a save here against Pittsburgh, and it's really just the walks that are going to drive you crazy with Chapman, and he's very hot or cold when it kind of comes to that, and when he falls apart, he totally falls apart, but at the same time, when he's on, he's just going to strike out the side like almost every single time. And it's pretty incredible to see what you're going to get out of Aroldis Chapman. And at least on the field, he is going to be very interesting as a fan to watch. Now, the other signing that they have done is Justin Wilson here. And Justin Wilson, I'm a little bit surprised that he had signed with the Red Sox because in reality, he signed a major league contract and he hasn't performed super well, at least at the major league level this last season. He had a 5.59 ERA, 46.2 innings pitched, 51 strikeouts, which isn't too bad. Doesn't walk a ton of guys, but he gives up way too many hits. 55 hits and 51 innings pitched. And that's kind of what's led to some of these numbers. Now, I feel like that the Red Sox really wanted to get a lefty reliever into their bullpen, and this was before they signed Aroldis Chapman. You have to remember this as well. And he's probably one of those guys. He did sign a major league contract, but it's not really worth a lot of money, and it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't succeed right away, if he's cut fairly early into the season, and we're talking like early May. he could definitely be off of this team and designated for assignment if he's not performing. So this is a guy who's mildly interesting. He could be good. He's had some decent success here in the past. If we go back to some of those numbers, 3.66 ERA in 2020, 2.54 ERA in 2019. But again, this was like 4 years ago, and he's 37 years old now. So you don't really know what you're going to get out of him. I don't have a whole lot else to say on him, but he's just another guy that they have added into this bullpen. And the last move that they have made to their 40-man roster this year is Yostinson Garcia being added to their 40-man roster. Now, he was a guy that they were afraid that he was going to get lost in the Rule 5 draft. Now, Garcia had a super impressive season last year. He turns 22, looks like tomorrow, actually, and he's a pretty decent center fielder, but really, in reality, it's his bat that's his calling card, and he had a great year. 23 home runs in 107 games, 33 walks, 24 extra base hits, 892 OPS. These are some very solid numbers from a guy who's heading into Double-A, but even though he's on the 40-man roster, he's probably not going to see time at the major league level this next season. And in fact, I kind of hope he doesn't, because that means one of two things. One, the Red Sox are desperate for some help in that type of situation. That's probably the most important thing here. But two, that just means that there are other guys behind him that haven't been performing. And so you have guys like Roman Anthony, Kyle Teal, Christian Campbell, Marcelo Mayer, and Chase Maidroth that would be ahead of him if being activated into the major leagues. And so if he was being passed over by all of these guys, and these guys are not currently on the 40-man, but they probably will be at some point in this 2025 season, if he's being elevated before them, there's probably some bigger problems within the organization in that 2025 season. Now, that's everything that the Red Sox have already done. Let's talk about the Red Sox need to be doing heading into the 2025 season. And if you haven't already noticed on this sheet, I have a couple spots here that really, really need to be filled in. And that is a top of the rotation starter as a free agent here. We can go ahead and put that in red. And then kind of like another back end of the rotation type starter, if possible. Right now, the Red Sox rotation as it stands is Tanner Houck, Lucas Giolito, Brian Bayo, Cutter Crawford, and Cooper Criswell. And in reality, if you have four of these guys, these top four guys in the rotation heading into the 2025 season, that's fine. Like, all four of those guys are very serviceable or very good starting pitchers. And the lowest one on the totem pole when it comes to this is probably going to be Cutter Crawford. And if you were telling me that Cutter Crawford's taking the ball every fifth day, I'm okay with that, because he averages about 6 innings pitched this last season, and he actually did very well. He was one of the best pitchers in baseball at the start of that last season. But if Cutter Crawford's your number 5 starter heading into this next year, what that does do is it puts you in the same position that you were the previous year, where the first guy that's going to be called backup in your rotation is going to be Cooper Criswell. And while I don't mind Cooper Criswell giving a spot start every now and again, if he's giving you 10 plus starts again, there's some problems that come in the rotation. And the Red Sox do have some guys in the minor league system that probably are going to impact the major leagues this next year out of the rotation, in Quinn Priester as well as Richard Fitz. Those are two of the biggest guys. But you also have some other interesting names like Luis Perales, maybe later in the year if he's recovering from surgery. And Josh Winkowski has been a serviceable starter in the past as well. So there are some kind of depth pieces. But at the same time, if you have 5 starters who are reliable starters, and then you have a 6th starter who can come in case of injury, because there's always injuries. And then on top of that 6th starter, you have another 3 or 4 guys that are in the minors that can kind of fill in, and if they don't work out, you can kind of sub out another different guy until somebody fits right and actually makes it in the major leagues. That's what you want to see out of your rotation. You don't want to be stuck with the situation where Cooper Criswell is having to make a ton of starts again, because while he was decent this last year, and it was a really great move by Craig Breslow to kind of pick him up for absolutely nothing, he still kind of sat at a 4 ERA this last year, and he really doesn't strike out a lot of guys, which in reality, if you're not striking out very many guys, it puts more pressure on this defense, and the Red Sox defense is still atrocious. They still have one of the worst defenses in baseball. Now, some of that should help with Trevor Story hopefully playing more than 30 games this next season. And if he can sit and maybe play 120 games, the infield defense is going to be a lot better. And hopefully whoever is playing second base this next year is better. Whether it's David Hamilton actually getting the nod there, or the Red Sox signing a guy to take over that spot. Like, I know Alex Bregman has been somebody who's been connected. or even they just promote Christian Campbell to be the starting second baseman early on in the year. These are both guys that would be defensive upgrades over David Hamilton. Cooper Criswell, at the end of the day, is just really not a guy that you want to have in your rotation. He's somebody that you want to be able to have either at AAA or at the back end of your bullpen to be able to kind of give you a multi-purpose tool. He's going to give you a bunch of things that will help you win. And he's not a guy that's going to have to be that guy that's like, hey, you're our seventh inning reliever or you're our number 5 starter regularly. Because if that's what happens heading into this next year, we're going to have a lot of the same problems that we had in 2024. So, in my opinion right now, the two biggest needs by far are those two starting pitchers, but there are still some other needs within this team. And the biggest one would be probably upgrading in the lineup with a right-handed power bat. Because when you look at this current lineup, you have Jarren Duran, Wilyer Abreu, Rafael Devers, and then Trevor Story batting fourth as your first righty, probably. And while Trevor Story, I still think, can be a guy that will bat in the top half of the lineup at some point before the end of his career is over, he really hasn't played much in the last couple seasons either. And when he has played, he hasn't consistently been that guy that can be in the middle of the lineup. Now, he did have a great stretch earlier in his career with the Red Sox where he hit like 9 home runs in a 14-day stretch. And if we're getting that type of Trevor Story, you want that guy batting third, fourth, fifth. But right now, I would just be way more comfortable if he's batting, 6th or 7th on opening day. And if you're going to make that happen, you have to acquire somebody who can bridge the gap in between Duran, Devers, and Tristan Casas. There has to be somebody in there. And the biggest targets right now are probably either Teoscar Hernandez or Anthony Santander. Here's what some of the stats look like for Hernandez and Santander over the past 2 seasons. This is 2 seasons worth of work. And both of them are very comparable in a lot of ways here. Now, Teoscar Hernandez and Anthony Santander both have put up close to 6 WAR. Both have played in a similar amount of games, almost the same amount of plate appearances. Teoscar Hernandez definitely has the advantage when it comes to contact, and Anthony Santander has the advantage when it comes to hitting home runs. But at the end of the day, they are very similar type players. One of the things definitely, though, that draws me a little bit more towards Anthony Santander when it comes to being on the Red Sox is that he is a switch hitter. And I think that would really help the lineup balance day to day with the Red Sox. Because again, when you're looking at a lineup here with Jarren Duran, Abreu, Devers, and Casas here all at the top of the lineup, if you were able to throw Santander and you put him in the middle of that, one, if there's a left-handed pitcher, at least you have a righty at the top that's going to be able to mash. But 2, if you have a right-handed pitcher who starts the game, you can then stack 5 left-handed hitters at the start of the game against that right-handed starting pitcher and hopefully just do a lot of damage in that first inning. On top of that, Teoscar Hernandez is 2 years older than Anthony Santander. Teoscar's 32 and Anthony Santander is only 30. And when you look at their fielding run value, Teoscar Hernandez is one of the worst outfielders in all of baseball, which would put you in a similar type position as you have currently with Masataka Yoshida. And the Red Sox essentially are refusing to put Yoshida in the outfield at all. And so, in my mind, why would you want to acquire another guy who is, again, a terrible fielder, and now you have 2 DH types on your team, whereas at least Anthony Santander, if you stick him in left field and he can figure out the monster a little bit, yeah, he's, a pretty bad outfielder. He's not a great outfielder, but he is at least better than Teoscar Hernandez. He's not terrible like Teoscar Hernandez is. He's just bad. And we can handle bad, but terrible is not going to help. So if it's my money, and it's not my money, but if it was my money, I would be putting it towards Anthony Santander. And if you give him a 4-year contract, maybe there's an option or 2 in there that takes you through all of his peak performing years. And guys like Santander that are power type hitters, they can potentially age a little bit more gracefully if they are in that DH role a little bit more frequently, which if you can put him in the DH role, that means that Masataka Yoshida probably is not going to be on this team into the next season. And while I do definitely love Yoshida, he has presented a lot of complications that have come with the Red Sox since he has been with this organization. Because even though he is a very good hitter, his lack of defensive ability in the outfield forces him to be at DH. At least that's what Alex Cora thinks, because they didn't play him out there at all this last season. And if he's forced to be at DH, then he's really clogging up a lineup that is already full of left-handed hitters. So you have Yoshida, who's on not a great contract. He's on a terrible contract, but it's not a great contract. And most teams aren't going to want to pick up just a strictly DH guy that's only going to give you around a 110 OPS plus. And while, yes, a 110 OPS plus is pretty good, and if you told me that this guy was batting 280 and could hit, 10 to 20 home runs and have a slugging percentage around 415 and OPS around 765. These aren't terrible numbers. These are pretty good numbers. And this is a guy that I think most teams would be very happy to have on their team, but probably just not for that money. And so a logical trade that has been getting floated around a lot is Jordan Montgomery. And while Jordan Montgomery had a terrible season this last year, Jordan Montgomery has also been linked to the Red Sox a lot over the previous couple seasons. And one of the other things that I like a lot about Montgomery is that he is a left-handed starting pitcher. So if you were able to trade for a guy like Jordan Montgomery, and again, yes, a terrible last season, a negative 1.4 WAR, a 6.23 ERA, but he has performed well in the playoffs. He has performed well just recently in the past couple of seasons, and he's a guy that I think can rebound and still be a number 3 or number 4 starter pretty easily in the right situation. And so if you can link up with Arizona and you can trade for Jordan Montgomery and he can be that first guy that goes in the back of this rotation, maybe he can be that guy that's that number 5 starter heading into the season. That's totally fine by me. I think that that's fine because, again, you have backup behind it. You have Cutter Crawford, you have Cooper Criswell, you have Fitz and Priester. He's just another guy that you can put on top of that. And it takes Yoshida kind of out of the equation and allows somebody like Santander to be able to slide in and take some of those DH spots at times and just gives you more flexibility throughout the whole roster. So just to recap what I just talked about here, I think that I would sign Anthony Santander to be our DH/outfielder type guy. I would trade Masataka Yoshida for Jordan Montgomery, the left-handed pitcher from the Arizona Diamondbacks, and I would slot him in as like our number 5 starter into this season. And so that alleviates a lot of the pressure on the lineup when it comes to the lefty-righty balance. It gets Yoshida out of this lineup, and it swaps a bad contract with the Arizona Diamondbacks in Jordan Montgomery, and still hopefully provides a guy that could potentially rebound and actually be a very serviceable guy, and maybe even a guy that could excel into the postseason if the Red Sox are able to make it in 2025. So just with those 2 moves right there, it doesn't feel like the Red Sox did anything crazy, but they still have completely changed the complexion of this team just with those 2 guys right now, which really just leaves one more big move that they kind of need to do, and that would be to sign a top-end free agent starting pitcher. And in my personal opinion, I think that what they should do in this spot is to just sign either Max Fried or Corbin Burnes. Hey guys, so quick pause in this video. I'm editing this right now, and the news has broken that Max Fried is signed with the New York Yankees for a $218 million contract over 8 years. A little bit more than what I thought he was going to get, but all the pitchers are going for higher. So this next section that's about to talk about Max Fried and Corbin Burnes, it's a little bit less relevant, but the point still makes sense, and they need to now reflect that target strictly to Corbin Burnes for this whole next point. But just wanted to cut that in there for a second. I hope they do something. Now, I think a lot of people would actually be pretty surprised to see how comparable Corbin Burnes and Max Fried have been, simply because Corbin Burnes is absolutely the bigger name that's on the market right now. But in reality, there have been very similar type pitchers over the last few seasons. Corbin does have a pretty decent edge when it comes to WAR here, but look at these games and games started. There is a huge difference that it comes between innings pitched here, as Corbin Burnes here absolutely dominates Max Fried when it comes to actual innings pitched since Max Fried was dealing with some injury. But even with all of those missing innings, Max Fried is still very close to Corbin Burnes in total WAR, which just means that he's a more productive starting pitcher, or at least has been over the last couple of seasons when he's been on the field. Something else that I find slightly concerning just about Corbin Burnes is while he has been one of the best starting pitchers in baseball, obviously he won the Cy Young Award in the 2021 season, and since then, he's placed in the top 10 in Cy Young every single year. He had a 2.92 ERA this last year, but his strikeout rate has steadily declined over the last 5 seasons, all the way down to 8.4 strikeouts per 9. And for a guy like Corbin Burnes, who kind of relies on that fastball, that's not a super encouraging sign. But something else that's also been very encouraging with him is he was able to decrease his walk rate year over year and kind of maintain it with what he's been able to do over his career. He is a control pitcher. But if he's just going to be more of a control pitcher and less of a strikeout guy moving forward, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for him to maintain some of this as he heads into his 30 seasons. Whereas Max Fried, to begin with, he's kind of always been a guy that hasn't struck out a lot of guys. When you look at his career stats right here, yes, he has a couple Cy Young finishes. He actually placed second in the Cy Young back in the 2022 season, but he's never been a strikeout guy. So when you look at him as somebody who's going to head into his 30 season, these guys are probably both going to sign contracts at least through their age 36 to potentially 38 season. A guy like Max Fried, who has never really relied on striking guys out to begin with, once he gets older and loses some of that velocity, If he ticks down a little bit in strikeouts to begin with, it's okay because he's already used to pitching in this way. Whereas Corbin Burnes is already having to try to figure out how to be a different type of pitcher with that lack of velocity. And is he going to be able to maintain that later on? We don't really know. But I'm not going to complain about either one of these guys that much. They're both very good starting pitchers, and they both could be number one starting pitchers in anybody's rotation for the most part. Now, are they true aces? Corbin Burnes has definitely the more of a pedigree that counts toward it's like it being a true ace. There's a difference between being a number one starter and an ace. There's probably only about 6 to 10 guys that are actual aces that you can look at and you can be like, that is an ace. Like when you look at Tarek Skubal or when you look at Garrett Cole, those are guys when you see them on the mound, you are not wanting to face those guys. I mean, unless you're the Red Sox with Garrett Cole, they just seem to own them. Thank you, outfield Devers. But outside of all of that, the point that I'm really trying to make here is that these guys, while they are great starting pitchers, they're not quite like the top echelon, at least at this point in their careers. But at the same time, the Red Sox really don't even have somebody that's like to their standard. The closest that they have is Tanner Houck, which at the end of the day, I think Tanner Houck's peak is kind of like a number 2 starter. And if Houck is a number 2 starter, you need somebody to be your number 1, and Max Fried and Corbin Burnes both can be that. So I think you go ahead and sign one of those. And if you can sign Fried or Burnes and get them at the top of your rotation, and this is kind of what the opening day roster looks like heading into the next year, well, I think that you can be pretty happy if you're a Red Sox fan, because this puts you in a very strong position, I feel, to be able to head back into the postseason finally in the 2025 year. But there's still some more moves that can kind of be made, and the Red Sox do need to acquire a catcher here. I keep advocating for Christian Vasquez to come back because the Twins are shopping him. Looking at this report here from Trade Rumors, with the apparent unlikelihood of a Correa deal coming together in mind, it still seems the Twins will have to shed some salary somewhere. To that end, Nightingale highlights utility man Willie Castro, right-hander Chris Paddock, and catcher Christian Vasquez as obvious trade candidates. And Christian Vasquez, I don't see any reason why the Red Sox couldn't trade for him back. Like, no, he had a negative .2 WAR last year, but at the end of the day, he's still a very serviceable type of bench catcher. And you have Connor Wong, who can be that everyday type guy. And another great thing about Vasquez is he's only signed through the next season. So for those of you that are worried about him blocking the future potential starting catcher in Kyle Teel here, you don't have to worry, because even though Kyle Teel probably will be called up at some point in this next season, he's probably not going to be ready to be like an everyday catcher, at least until the 2026 season. And so if he can come up and maybe get 100 to 200 at-bats at some point this season, I would be very happy with that. But he's not going to come in and be the starting catcher right away. It's just very unlikely that that's going to be able to happen. But if you were to say in the 2026 season that he can come in and potentially take that role and be that starting catcher, yeah, I totally believe that, and I think that that's what could happen. So to be able to acquire a guy like Christian Vasquez in the meantime, who can come in, who knows the organization already, and who is somebody who can be serviceable and a defensive upgrade over Connor Wong later in the innings, I would definitely take that every single day of the week. So just to recap everything I've kind of talked about here for the Red Sox, if the end of your offseason looks like Anthony Santander coming in and being that right-handed switch-hitting guy in the middle of the lineup, if you have Max Fried or Corbin Burnes at the top of your rotation, you're able to get Jordan Montgomery to go towards the back end of your rotation, and you get Christian Vasquez to be a backup catcher, are you, as a Red Sox fan, satisfied with that offseason, especially with the start of it being Juan Soto could sign with the team? I think the answer is probably yes, but I do think there is still a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth that comes with, hey, the Red Sox just offered $700 million, and they probably signed maybe $250, $300 million to get Santander and Fried, and then they traded for a couple guys that potentially could be kind of washed up. But in reality, I don't think you need to go too much crazier than that. I know that they're connected to guys like Alex Bregman, and I really don't like the idea of Alex Bregman joining this team for a couple different reasons, but the biggest just being I think he's going to be a little bit older than I want him to be with this new youth that is coming in with this team. Bregman is going to be heading into his age 31 season, and I'm sure he still has a lot of good baseball left in him. If you look at his last 3 seasons here, he's been sitting at 4.6, 4.9, 4.1 WAR. Pretty similar type guy all around. He had a Gold Glove this last season, so you know that defense still plays, and he probably would come in and be the everyday starting second baseman if he were to sign. But if he does sign with the Red Sox, what's that contract looking like? Well, it's probably sitting at like 7 years and around $200 million. And I don't like the idea of signing an Alex Bregman to do the job of something that Christian Campbell probably could do for the league minimum, to maybe not the same degree, but probably pretty close fairly early on in his career. And I really hope that the guys in the front office realize that the fans aren't necessarily frustrated with the idea that we're not signing big league free agents. We're just frustrated with the idea that we're constantly flipping and flopping all over the place and we're not actually making a decision. And for a long time here, it's been us waiting for these prospects like Roman Anthony, Kyle Teal, Christian Campbell, Marcelo Meyer, and Chase Meadroth, stuff, guys like that, to be able to come up and to make a difference at the major league level. And I think it's more fun for a fan, for a homegrown guy to come up and be like, hey, that's the face of your franchise, than it is to go sign a guy like Alex Bregman, who has a lot of baggage when it comes to like the 2017 Houston Astros and the cheating scandal. And we already have a guy in our manager with Alex Cora attached to all of that. So do you really want to add another guy into that mix on top of it when you could just wait for some of these guys like Christian Campbell to come up and, again, potentially just do something very similar to what Alex Bregman is already doing? But again, that's just me. I mean, if they sign Alex Bregman and he comes in and he's a total stud, I'm not going to complain about it. I'm absolutely not. I just think that there's a way to kind of go about this to supplement the team, to be able to add pieces that you need, like starting pitching, while still being able to wait and hold off on trading some of these guys to be able to actually fill this roster in the next 2025-2026 season. Because we've been waiting patiently for a long time for this, and I don't mind waiting a little bit longer. And if the 2025 season, they kind of squeak into the playoffs and they get knocked out in the first round, that's fine. Because I understand heading into the 2026 season, that's where guys like Christian Campbell and Roman Anthony and Kyle Teal and Marcelo Meyer, those guys potentially could be really making a difference heading into that year. And again, it's just more fun rooting for guys that have grown up within the organization than it is signing guys who are already 30 years old and are on the back end of their careers, and you're going to have to pay a ton of money to, and are going to be liabilities later in their career, and are going to be used as an excuse as to why they can't do more later on with this Red Sox team in 3 or 4 years. So let's just stand the course a little bit longer, in my opinion. I think you wait for some of these guys to fill out that back end of the lineup here. And ideally, David Hamilton's not the starting second baseman by the end of this next season. Nothing against him. He absolutely balled out when he needed to. And the lineup was so much fun with David Hamilton and Cedar Rafaela and Jarren Duran for a lot of this summer in the 2024 year. But if you're losing somebody like David Hamilton out of your lineup and you're replacing him with somebody like Christian Campbell, what's there to complain about? Anyway, guys, that was my word vomit Tuesday, I guess. Is that what today is? Is it Tuesday? Yeah, I mean, if it's Tuesday, great. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I've been wanting to do more content lately, but it's pretty challenging, you know, with a little infant child to actually be able to find time to do things. And I'm doing this right now when he's completely asleep. So thankfully that's been able to happen, because it's been a very long video. But hopefully I'll be able to get more stuff out soon. I have some edited type videos that I want to try to get out before the start of next season. So we'll see what else is going to be going on with that. But hopefully you enjoyed this. Subscribe to the channel if you like this. I do this periodically. I'll try to do some more shorts when I can. That way there's at least some content coming out of this channel. But thank you again for everybody who's lasted this long. It's been a super long video and it's been a lot of fun. So we'll see you next time. Leave your comments in the comment section below. I love having conversations with all of you guys. And we'll see you next time. Bye.